This is Jake Adams, CEO at Simplify EDU.
And I'm Danielle Griggs, a tutor coordinator at Simplify EDU, and you're listening to Educators at Heart.
This podcast is for parents and students interested in peering behind the curtain to get to know the authentic journey we're all on as students of life.
Every week, we'll interview a different educator we know so that they can share the unique experiences that have shaped their perspective on the most important things students should know on their journey to higher education. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I can't wait for you to listen to today's episode. I'm joined by an incredible guest, Josh Brazier. Josh is an author, mentor, CEO, life coach, and humanitarian. With years of work in mentorship, humanitarian therapy, and executive functioning coaching, Josh has valuable experience and knowledge that we are thrilled to share with all of you today. Josh is also the author of books Bang Head Here and the recently released Making Plans That Stick, an honest look at the mindsets that keep us stuck. Today, Josh and I discuss the topic of executive function skills and the lifelong benefits they offer. He gives countless nuggets of wisdom and insight that is relevant to students of all ages and adults. Also, we've linked his information and books in the show notes so you can follow the work he is doing even further, which I highly recommend. So now, let's jump on in. Josh, well, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, excited to be here, and thanks for inviting me. It's
Absolutely.
Always good to talk about these things, I think.
For sure. So can you tell us, where are you originally from?
Born and raised in California, Los Angeles area, a little bit north of LA. Like if you imagine where Malibu is on the coast, I just lived in the hills, above it. It was a pretty idyllic childhood, I guess you could say. So beautiful,
right? Beautiful
place to grow up. There's a town called Agora Hills.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So can you tell me kind of what sparked your interest in mentorship and education, kind of, leading you to the career paths that you've really taken over the past several years?
Absolutely. I would say that it was probably the most unconventional kind of path towards this. I studied advertising in college. I love being creative, working on different, taking an idea from your mind and kind of bringing it out into the real world, whether that was an advertising campaign or an actual product. So had a lot of fun doing that. But during my college time, some friends and I started a nonprofit. That was, at the time, there was that big tsunami that happened in 2004. That's how old I am. I'll just age myself. Right. Then that's when I went to college. But we just kind of felt really really called to do something. So we threw some benefit concerts, and we just saw there was just a really big energy for like service work. Like people wanted to get involved beyond maybe their school studies. And so we just started this nonprofit that started taking college students to an orphanage in Mexico. Then we expanded to Brazil and Africa, different countries in Africa, and then India, just all over the world. And that's where I came to fall in love with mentoring and just working with young people. I never thought that's what I'd be doing. Mm-hmm. But I did have some experiences growing up working in a refugee camp in Morocco and working in Spain for a little bit, where I did get to work with young people a lot. And I just saw the power that you can have when somebody sees you as a person of influence. I think it's a very important kind of relationship dynamic that can be created. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my story. We just had a lot of people coming on these trips, and their parents would call me afterwards and be like, "Hey, my son or my daughter had a really great time on your trip. They really connected with you. They're kind of struggling. Would you mind taking them out to dinner or out to lunch?" And then I just started doing this informal mentoring, and then I just started working in with different practices and treatment centers and different things, and just started to kind of just hone my tools and my skills on working with young people.
Yeah, so I love that. It's so neat to see how things kind of evolve, right? Like you mentioned, It's not maybe what you pictured doing, but to see it kind of evolve, that's so neat. So today I'm super excited to dive into this. I know that this is going to be something that's really beneficial to our families and lots of families that are out there. We're talking about the lifelong benefits of executive function.
Yep.
And I know this is an area that you are heavily influential in. So to kind of kick it off, can you tell us what problems do you find that young people today are facing in kind of navigating those high school years and transitioning into early adulthood?
Yeah. There's a couple things that come to mind for me. Number one, there's endless distractions right now, and too much information, and not enough skills. And we'll get into that in terms of how to process that information, how to kind of eliminate those distractions so they can actually hear, what they're kind of wanting and being called to do, which sounds kind of maybe woo wooey, but it's not. There's like this part of us that we have our interests, we have these things that bring like meaning to our lives.
Yeah.
And if we're too distracted and with too much information, we just kind of go from this thing to the other to the other. We never practice that ability to see something through long enough to figure out, like, does it work for me, and what were the benefits of that, and what would I change? And so that's the main thing that I see so much with young people now, is when I hear their histories and their stories, it zigs, it zags, it goes all over the place, and there's never been some through lines that teach them how to practice these skills that they're going to need to be ultimately successful as adults. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that makes total sense. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, just the attention span, the distraction, and then
Uh-huh.
just spilling into all areas of our lives.
I don't want to like throw all the blame on social media or on
Right.
technology or anything like that, but there are a lot of distractions. I mean, whether it's just
Mm-hmm.
trends and yeah, these kind of really soundbite type informational, like, just videos and just different things that they see, it doesn't allow them to get to what I would call like an original thought. Like, hey, like I'm going to take this idea or I'm going to take this kind of thing that's been given to me and I'm going to get to a point where I take the ownership of it and take
Mm-hmm.
those thoughts that I'm having about it and doing something about it. It's just following it wherever it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really, it's an important skill to develop in life.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So kind of talking about executive function.
Hmm.
So I guess first off, for maybe some listeners who are not familiar,
Yeah.
can you just tell us what this is?
Yeah. Executive functioning are basic kind of, I would say, building block skills and tools that young people should be learning from as early as we can. And those could be things like learning how to initiate a task, how to
Mm-hmm.
plan something, working memory. How does my memory work on certain things? And there's
Right.
there's a basic 10 and we can go through them, but there's just these skills that we build as young people in home and then practice at school and in extracurriculars that allow us to be able to function as an adult. They're not, I would call them adult daily living tasks because there's things like routines and things that we need to do, eat and hygiene and all these different things. But executive functioning is the ability to be able to say, these are the kind of the next steps. How do I move it forward? How do I finish them? Yeah, so they're hopefully that wasn't too vague. I didn't know how deep we wanted
Yeah.
to go into like all 10 of them, but there's just they're the skills that allow us to implement an idea and then carry it through.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I know you mentioned, where they're kind of learning this, kind of
Hmm.
starting at home, moving into school. Tell us about kind of that developmental process. Like what age are kids starting to develop these skills? Like tell us about that
Yeah.
process a little bit, if you will.
I would say that executive functioning should be on the mind of every parent from the time that the kid is born. So this would be like the
Hmm.
habits and routines
Right.
that we are teaching our kids and being consistent with. Like the thing about
Hmm.
executive functioning, where I come in as an executive functioning coach and try to teach people about this, is that there hasn't been the consistency in any one of
Hmm.
these areas that allows them to follow through. So when I'm saying start, the day that they're born, is there a night routine? Is there an evening, like that evening routine that you take your kids through to get to bed? Do you follow that consistently? Is there something that they go through in the morning that allows them to understand, this is the next task, this is what I have to do to finish it, here are the skills that I need to be able to follow through on these different things? And are we
Hmm.
consistent enough as parents to say, okay, here's our homework routine, here's
Right.
here's our communication style and ability. That's a big thing about executive functioning, is to be able to kind of regulate our emotions, but also to be able to express what we're feeling. And
Hmm.
so that feels like the best time to start, is just like, day
Yeah.
one, but also just understanding that routines are the ways that we build these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, with the work that you do and,
Mhm.
and kind of throughout your career, are you seeing an uptick in struggling with these types of skills? Like, tell us
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah, so my bread and butter, and I hate this phrase, but the failure to launch is my bread and butter coaching.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
I'm grateful that of late I've been getting a lot of parents who are being proactive, who are calling me and their kids are in college and they're starting to really, really struggle, and I can get in there with them before they've already like dropped out and they're back at home and they feel like, like failures and they haven't been able to accomplish anything. I do have a subset of people that I've worked with over a long period of time that just haven't felt that momentum, haven't felt that confidence that they can start again. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think going back to your question, like I do see a huge need for this, and it really starts to show in college, in higher
Right.
education, because of the fact that during middle school, high school, even elementary school, there's enough scaffolding and structure around the kid. The parents are there. All those things are there that they're able to kind of get by. And it's not until they have
Right.
that first day on their own where they start to see, well, I don't know how to do these things. I don't know how to balance
Right.
and schedule and plan when to do my laundry, when to get food, when to do my classes, all those things.
Yeah,
So,
that makes total sense.
yeah,
All of those supports are just kind of
they're
ripped
gone.
right out.
Yeah,
And
they're gone.
yeah.
And the parents are there hoping, but the kids feel very confident because it's really exciting. There's a lot of momentum in those first days, but that usually I could see within a week or so is when I get a call and saying, hey, he or she's not going to class. They're not going to class. Like, what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. So thinking about some benefits here of what you've talked about, these executive function skills, what are some of those immediate benefits of improving those skills for students? Like what can parents look for there?
I would say momentum and confidence. Those are very maybe broad terms, but momentum is a very palpable thing for a young person when they feel like I just finished my homework, I did well on my quiz, I just went to class, I just did this. That's momentum, and most kids aren't even aware that that's what's going on. They just feel good, right? And then what I try to like correlate is that momentum creates this kind of confidence because all of a sudden they're now telling me, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that. And that's that thing that parents can look for is like, if they can't recognize or help teach their kids that they're creating momentum, that they're in this state of like kind of forward movement, then that's a big indicator to parents like, hey, something's going wrong. Like we don't have that kind of step to step to step to step that's going on, and if that's not there, then we have to kind of step back and say what's holding them back.
Right.
Yeah.
So then thinking long term, okay, so I know we're kind of talking about that transition, high school to college, those young adult years, which my God, that's a hard transition anyway. I mean, I'm thinking back on that. I mean, that's a hard time.
Yeah.
But then what about those lifelong benefits that, kind of taking them through their career, through their adult years? Like, what are some benefits we see there of developing those executive functioning skills?
Well, like, I don't know if you've seen or maybe heard these kind of more maybe anecdotal things of like parents coming in to negotiate salaries and parents kind of waking up their kids still to go to to go to work or to even resolve conflicts that are going on at work. Those are all executive functioning skills, to be able to recognize where things aren't going well and to be able to take that kind of stock. Those are some of the long-term benefits. But like when I was talking about like momentum and confidence, what those two things create, if we can teach them to our kids through these executive functioning skills, is that those two things create opportunities. And then if you're seeing somebody or something in your kid that they oh, I have no opportunities, I'm so down, I'm this or that, that means we're off in those executive functioning skills, because like I said, they create momentum, they create confidence, and then we're able to see opportunity. I don't know if that makes sense, and hopefully these things don't sound too woo-woo, but this is exactly what I see with my clients and what I try to create day in and day out. Like it's not rocket science, but it's literally just getting them to take those steps.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you've mentioned too that you love helping students develop curiosity and meaning in education, which is certainly something that us at Simplify EDU, like what we're trying to do as well. And I love that. So I guess I'm curious, how do you see the development of strong executive function skills intersecting here? Like finding that curiosity and meaning in education? Like, is there a connection? What connection is there?
Yeah, I think the connection that I find with, especially with curiosity, meaning in education, and I'll tie it back to like executive functioning skills, is that a lot of times when I'm working with kids that are in college, it feels like they're taking too personally their classes and the things they need to do, their assignments, things like that, instead of being curious about the actual learning, that they get this opportunity at this point in time to learn how to be a lifelong learner and to how to be somebody who's curious and to take meaning from that. That all the basis of those are those executive functioning skills that allows them to plan for those things, to think through those things, to then be able to understand their emotions enough to be able to make better choices. I think that those um, infusing education with that kind of curiosity and meaning allows them to stick with it and not to give up and not to say, this class is too hard or I'm not interested in this. If they can just learn for the sake of learning and learn for the sake of curiosity and realizing how meaningful that's going to be and this experience is going to be in their life, that changes a perspective. It's a whole different shift. Because if you think about why kids go to college nowadays, maybe they're excited to join a frat or a sorority or all the social stuff. But then when they actually get to the nitty gritty of the classes, especially general ed classes, they just start to lose this momentum because they start to take personally, oh, this is not fun. This is not interesting. But you can always find something new. You can always find something to learn, whether that's in a relationship or in a class. And if they can have that kind of filter, then it changes things a lot. It really does. I don't know if that makes any sense. Sorry. Sometimes you're going to
Oh,
see on this that I can
absolutely.
I'm very stream of consciousness, but these are kind of coming from very deep
Yeah.
experiences with a lot of people.
Oh my God. No,
So
it's excellent.
yeah,
Such great perspective for sure. And then, I mean, even just seeing then how that then propels you take that even further into the career world,
hmm
into their ability to do well,
yeah,
and pursuing, those career paths that they choose.
absolutely. And I think it's just those executive functioning skills. It allows them to process information. It allows them to process opportunities. Allows them to kind of process this momentum that they're creating because they can stick to a routine and because they can understand what's going on with them and they know how to plan and they know how to follow through. All those
Right.
different things allows them to just take advantage of those opportunities and not just go for something because it's going to make me the most money or it was the easiest thing or whatever. There's so many kids that I'll take on a junior year and they're like, well, why are you studying this? Oh, it was the easiest thing.
Yeah.
They're not going to follow. They're going to struggle post college because they didn't study something that they were in love with. They didn't learn those skills, and so then we're going to take the next job that just makes the most sense or was the easiest to get, and it just sends them on this path that's less meaningful and honestly less curious for them. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So I know we'll talk a little bit about specifics for our
hmm
families, but I'm kind of curious, like at a 10,000-foot perspective,
hmm
h- how do we fix this? How do you feel like we've talked about all these things that are kind of compounding and feeding into maybe some of these issues with the ability to have these executive function skills?
hmm
What are some ways just in the work that you've done, you see improvements in this area?
Yeah. The first thing that I usually have people do is Google like just the executive functioning skills and just have them get familiar. Like in my book, I just have a section where I list them all out. This is how these show up in your
Yeah.
life. This is what these are. Just that it's not taught. Like there's parts of me that get really frustrated with the education system because there are certain key concepts and things that just aren't like really well elucidated in the sense of like, hey, like this is what executive functioning is. Or one of the
Right.
things that I try to teach in my book then that we can talk about later on is like the majority of my book is not really this idea of like here are the top 10 things that you need to do
Hmm.
to be successful. It's really like I dove in the beginning, like my second section about just assessing is the longest part because all I'm trying to do is to help young people understand what's getting in the way. And parents need to
Right.
learn how to do that. And sometimes parents aren't very confident in their communication skills or they haven't built that culture in their family of communicating well with their teens. And so that's why you look for a mentor or a teacher or something else
Right.
to kind of figure out. But the number one thing that I do when I start to work with somebody is I start to unpack what are these things that are getting in the way, like we talked about before. What's your use of social media? Where's your confidence level? What are some of those experiences in the past that you've had in school, around education, around your social life, whatever it might be, that have
Hmm.
created these messages in your mind that tell you that you can't do these things? We need to locate those things, understand them, so then I can start to teach these executive functioning skills without those things getting in the way. I
Yeah.
hope that makes sense. But
Yeah.
it's a very, very important process of being able to like understand what's going on, and then breathe like adult perspective into it, and then be able to apply the right skill or tool. We don't get to that point. We just go with the emotion. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. We've been teaching kids our emotions and our feelings are the most important things. And not to say that we're not going to come in and be very understanding, but they also understand that there's work to be done,
For
right?
sure. Oh
It's
yeah.
not, it's not all to be felt and worried about.
I totally
Yeah.
agree. So then maybe getting some
Mm-hmm.
nitty gritty a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
I would
Yep.
love to hear, for parents who
Yep.
are listening, who maybe are thinking like, that's my kid, like they're struggling with these skills.
Yep.
What are some practical tips or really best practices that you can share to
Yep.
help
Yep.
them grow in these skills?
In the book, and the first thing that I do with my students is I create for them really rigid morning and evening routines so they can start to feel that momentum that I was talking about, that I've
Okay.
been able to do
Yeah.
this to this to this, to plan ahead and see what their needs are. I have a need to go to the gym. I have a
Mm-hmm.
need to eat. I have a need to study. And then we kind of help them like set those into their morning routines and then to their evening routines. But then I also help them learn how to plan their days. If parents can sit down with their kids and have them make like a master to-do list,
Okay.
these are all the things that I need to do in a given day. I need to fill the car up with gas. I need to do this. I have this doctor appointment. I have class. I have to study for this. If they can get it all out onto a big piece of paper and teach kids to do that, and then we translate that into a morning routine. Hey, this is where this goes. This is where
Mm-hmm.
that goes. And we teach them how to kind of do that. I teach this concept in the book. For some people, it's really hard to be like at 8 p.m., I'm going to do this, or at 3 p.m., I've got this. So I create these buckets for my clients. Like, hey, here's your morning bucket. Here's your
Okay.
afternoon bucket. Here's your evening bucket. What's going in each one of those buckets? And then when they
Mm-hmm.
can just kind of like check those things off, we get that hit of dopamine, that sense of accomplishment, because
Yeah.
we've deliberately practiced something. This is one of my big equations that I have in the book, but the formulas where it's like, hey, like if you deliberately practice something like this, you get that sense of accomplishment, and then you have hope.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Mm-hmm. I
Very
love
simple.
that.
I don't know if that's overly simplistic for people, but a lot of people, when I sit down, what needs to get done? Do you have a to-do list, a master to-do list of what everything that needs to get done? They say no. And so that's a
Right.
very core executive functioning skill. For the planning part, we need to know what needs to be done. So we get that all out,
Mm-hmm.
and then we put it the best we can into a rhythm, and then we start to follow that rhythm, and then that,
Mm-hmm.
momentum, confidence, and hope, right?
Yeah, I
So,
love that. And I think so. As a parent myself,
mhm.
I have younger kids. I know that it's always can kind of be that tricky line of like you're doing things for your kids, but then when finding that fine line of transition to teaching them to do things for themselves. And
Right.
I love that piece of teaching them like this is your responsibility. This is your ownership.
Mhm.
I
Well,
I
it's
love
their
that.
day, right? It's their life. And that's where
Yeah.
we kind of have maybe gone a little bit of astray with parenting. So
Mm-hmm.
I adopted two kids, and I
Okay.
adopted them as teenagers, so at 13 and 15. And so
Wow.
when my oldest son first went to college, we got him some books on how to study better. The cultural differences between the United States and where they were adopted from
Yeah.
was stark. But what he learned the most, and I wish I could take credit for it, I can't, is he just started
Mm-hmm.
observing every other college student around him, sorry, and the ones that had like these really, really great executive functioning skills. They could figure out what needed to be done, they could figure out
Mm-hmm.
what they were feeling, and then they could make plans around them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think, as
Wow.
you're saying, as a parent, don't be afraid to start a kid early. Experiment. Hey, that didn't work out. Maybe that was too
Mm-hmm.
early. I'll back off. I'll still help them a little bit, or
Yeah.
I'll still give them the concepts or the skills, right, and the
Mm-hmm.
tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. I love
Yeah.
it. So okay, so helpful. Like I think there's just some great things, for parents here. I would love to. I know you've mentioned your book, so I would
Hmm.
love, you have a new book that came out, making plans that stick, an
Hmm.
honest look at the mindset that keeps us stuck.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. I know you've dropped some nuggets already, but tell us more about what you share in there, what
Yeah.
people can find when they go read this.
Absolutely. Like, I think the first thing that they're going to find, and I was purposeful in this, even though it made me a little bit nervous, is there are great books out there on how to
Yeah.
set goals and follow through. I mean, I recommend Atomic Habits to everybody. And Atomic
Mm-hmm.
Habits is a very detailed book about the whys and the hows behind all this stuff. what I was just noticing in my coaching is that there was a lot getting in the way before people would even begin to consider these things. And so I wrote a book with lots of stories from other people, lots of stories from my own life where I've felt like completely stuck and not knowing how to get going on things and moving things forward. So I broke the book down into 4 parts where we assess kind of those mindsets that we're talking about, just an honest look about where our minds are around a lot of these concepts so we can just have a good baseline.
Yeah.
And then, I teach some concepts in there about like just the tricks that our brain plays on us, how our past creates these messages. And then we go into just like a part to plan, right? So we the next section is all about just kind of how do we get all the information of things that we want to do. And then how do we actually like do those things is the next section. So there's just full of just little skills and little concepts and things like that. I tried to make it to where each story kind of built momentum and they could see themselves on the pages versus it just being very dry and maybe clinical. And then the last section of the book is, B, and I just go into what type of characteristics make you a good, effective person. And so I just share stories from that. And the hope is that they could see themselves on the page and find some momentum versus just feeling like, oh man, these are just steps I can't take, or they're things that I want to do. That's just what I noticed. And I believe in Atomic Habits and all those other books out there, but I would recommend these books and then they wouldn't be read. And that's just a sign to me that something else is getting in the way. And I needed to kind of address that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Excellent. Well, listeners, you got to check it out. It's so many incredible things in there that I think will be so beneficial. And then, to our audience, how can they find you and follow the work that you're doing? Tell us, where they can find you.
Yeah, so I've got a personal website, joshbrazier.com. You can find my books on there. I have other books that I've written with other people. We've got my nonprofit on there, my coaching, just different things like that I do. And so we're just kind of starting to build momentum around the book and kind of getting it out there and just talking with different people. So if you have any questions or if you need a session to kind of go over these different things, you can book them with me, or I can recommend somebody else. But it's just kind of one of those things that I'm trying to get this message out there to people that executive functioning skills are important. And there's a lot of people struggling right now. And the main thing that we have to do first is help them to figure out what's getting in the way versus just saying, why can't you do this? And I think that's a message that gets thrown around a lot. Like, oh, you did fine in high school. You did fine in middle school. Why can't you do it now?
Yeah.
So
That's excellent. And listener, we'll have all this linked in the show notes so that you guys can, find all these excellent resources of Josh's and, be able to follow the work that he's doing. So last, but before I let you go, this has been so excellent. We do always like to ask our simplified lessons, we call them. So basically kind of asking our guests, what's maybe 1 or 2 of the most important life lessons that, you have learned as a student of life that you wouldn't mind sharing to kind of help, others learn those lessons more quickly?
Absolutely. I do go over these in the book, but I find these 2 to be incredibly, incredibly important. I define personal integrity is like when I say I'm going to do something, I do it no matter who's watching.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lesson I try to teach kids is like, hey, you put that on your to-do list, you put that on your calendar today. It doesn't matter what validation you get from it. You follow through because you want to, right? And it leads into the second part, and that is to be anti-permissive. And I think for parents a lot, there's this permissiveness. There's this excuse making that we all do because we maybe feel bad for our kids or they're struggling or whatever it is. So I try to teach kids to be anti-permissive. Like, don't make excuses for yourself. If there was something that got in the way, you address that. But you don't say that you can't do anything. You don't say that you're not good at something. You just have to like figure out that next step versus, just giving up completely. And I think that happens a little bit too much in our society nowadays to where, like I said, goes along with that first thing of personal integrity, where kids don't believe in themselves because they don't believe they're going to follow through. And that is a rough situation to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Maybe
Well, Josh,
that was hopefully not a downer, but
no,
that's what I would.
no, I love it. Oh
Yeah,
man, so
yeah,
so many good pieces of information and wisdom that you've shared here.
yeah.
I've loved hearing your perspective, and gleaning from the work that you've done and your expertise on this subject. So thanks so much for being here. I know our listeners are just going to benefit so much. So thank you.
No, thanks for having me. I know my nephew's going to be really stoked that his artwork got on the podcast, so he'll excited for that.
Look
So.
at that, featured right in the background.
Exactly. We got a good Jackson Pollock going on above me. So yeah.
Perfect.
No,
Love
thanks for
it.
having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. And like I said, this is something these are important topics that should be discussed. And yeah, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our show for future episodes. See you next time.